Burnout is rampant. 77% of employees are saying they experience some form of burnout. That's wild. When you think about the impact on people, you think about the impact on organizations, I came to the conclusion that work isn't working for people and it's not working for companies either. Because companies are paying twice. When people experience burnout, companies pay twice for that. You pay for the time they're gone, and then if they don't come back, you're paying to retrain. You're like there's a lot going on here, and their performance is stalling as well.
Here's a question my guest, Naki, put to me that I haven't stopped thinking about. She said, Charles, if someone looked at your habits, your calendar, how your mornings start, how you go to bed at night, what would they say you're becoming? That question comes from someone who spent decades running at full throttle across every sector, wearing titles that opened every door, and who had to lose it all before she could actually answer that question for herself. On this episode of When We Pause, we talk about reinvention, the hidden cost of just pushing through, and what it actually looks like when you're building something on your own terms. This one got personal for both of us. It has been such a long time since we last chatted. We were just talking about the fact I was thinking about this. When was the first time I had a chance to meet you? And it was probably when I first moved to Toronto in 2010. And your name kept on popping up on so many different circles based on the work I was doing at the time. And then learning that we come from the same ancestry, ethnicity, both your families from Ghana as well. As soon as I saw your
Yeah.
your last name in particular, I'm like, okay. Yeah, fellow member of the community of the family as well.
Thanks.
So it's such a small world, but it's so good to have you join the podcast. And for people who don't know you, or if you're going to introduce yourself, what, beyond what I guess you'd see online, on social media, how would you describe yourself to someone, or give me a bit of a background or sort of a synopsis of who you are and your story and your journey?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I've been following your journey with lots of interest since 2010, and it's been amazing to see all the interesting things you've been up to. The question you've asked is a difficult one to answer, but I'll do my best. I would describe myself as, Ghana born, raised in Toronto. My formative years were spent in Rexdale, and then I went to school at the University of Guelph. And, I think even just that, that sort of contrast between where I was raised and where I went to school has sort of been emblematic of my life. I've just had a life of these contrasts where, I find myself having worked in the not-for-profit sector for many years and then pivoting into the broader public sector and then pivoting again into the private sector. And I've just spent a lot of my time being in different kinds of work, but also observing how work happens and how power and influence are managed and maintained, and how do you make impact in all of these spaces. So I would describe myself as a person who's been very keen on reinvention. I'm keen on being in something and being an observer of that thing, and I've always taken a practical approach to the work that I've done. And so all of these experiences culminate now in the work I'm doing around leadership and talent development and work culture. I've just been able to reinvent myself again. I've been able to bring all this contrast to bear. And I've been able to take the things that I've studied and observed, and now I'm in a position to share that with others.
And it's been so magical to be able to watch your pivots and your pauses along the way since, the fact that you and I kind of connected like almost 15 years ago. What was the catalyst when you think about all the different pivots and pauses along the way? What was the catalyst for you to be able to make that change, whether it was a new job or a new opportunity, personal or professional? Was there a specific thing after 2 or 3 years that you feel like you've reached that saturation point? What was it that made you kind of think about, okay, it's time for me to think about whatever the next thing is going to be?
Well, I mean, I began working at the age of 13, and I was working in I landed the summer job working in a community garden in Rexdale. And following that summer, they said, "We have this after school program. Would you like to, work a couple hours a week?" And so I did. I started working after for this. They called it an anti-drug program, a drug prevention program. So I was working there 2 days a week between 14 and 16. And then when I turned 16, the person that I reported to left the organization, and they didn't replace her. So I suddenly found myself in a position where I was now managing a team. And these were a team of my peers, of my friends, the people that I would hang out with at school, now became my direct reports. I was writing funding applications. I was, doing, making sure they got paid and all of that stuff. And I think that experience at such a formative time in my life just taught me that I can do things. Like I can try things out. And I've been very fortunate to be in many positions where people have said, "We want you to just try this. Are you game?" So when you ask me about, what's informed these pauses, I think I've just had this interest to try things. And when I went to work at Civic Action, which is where I think you and I met, it was known as the Summit Alliance at the time. This is an organization that has at its root this collaborative approach to addressing really intractable challenges facing the Greater Toronto Area. And they bring together very intentionally leaders from the private sector, not for profit, and the public sector. And once I had an opportunity to see how the resources, skills, approaches, perspectives of each of these sectors come together, I decided then and there, I began working there in 2006. In 2007, I said, "I'm gonna have a career that spans all of these sectors." Like, that was a decision that I made, and I think part of that was informed by the fact that I'm not afraid to try things because I had that experience at 16. And I knew that going from not-for-profit to private would be difficult. So I thought the public sector could be a bridge. So I had worked at Civic Action for 6 years at that point, and as time would have,
Yes.
the Pan Am and Para-Pan Am Games had begun the work of its organizing committee, and I applied for a role there and landed it, and that experience was, again, super instructive because how often do you get to work in an organization where when you get your offer letter, they tell you what your last day is gonna be?
Exactly.
And I know you've had that experience working for Uber, right? And so, like and as I said earlier in the conversation, I went into that job thinking, "This is gonna be an interesting sociological experiment." So I was in the job, but I was also observing, like, relationships and how people relate to each other and how things get done, and, it was such an interesting study, but it was also a really good segue for me because in that environment, the conversation about what are you doing next is very open. So you'd be at meetings with sponsors and they'd say, "So, like, when the games wrap up, what do you want to do?" And you'd have very open dialogue. And so, as luck would have it, I was approached by one of the banks, CIBC, who was the premier partner of the games, about an opportunity in their executive talent management function. And so that led me to my private sector role, which is what I had wanted to do next. And again, that was a great opportunity because it just gave me a bird's eye view to so many parts of the bank. And though I had worked alongside banks and bankers in my roles at Civic Action and at the games, really being inside the bank was something very different. And so that role was a really perfect way for me to get my feet wet. And then ultimately leading to a 7-year stint at TD after
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you touched on earlier was this ability to want to try things, and some of the people who've just kind of gave you those opportunities to say, hey, this thing here that we have, either it's a shiny object or a problem or challenge, that we think that you'd provide an interesting insight or approach to tackling that problem or that challenge or this particular avenue. This notion of I'm reading this book called Uncommon Favor, and it's written by Dawn Staley, who is the coach of one of the U.S. women's basketball teams. Right, it was in the news recently, and I've been out, so didn't know a lot about her, but I've been reading it over the last couple of weeks, and she talks about some of the people who've come into her life. I mean, hindsight's always 2020, but she's talked a lot about people who've come into her life who have just either opened up a door or intuited some sort of problem or challenge that she could probably tackle or provide insight on, and things that have been open to her because of that. And I'm curious, when you look at your career, about, I don't know if you call it uncommon flavor from your perspective, but the people who've been influential and kind of steering your particular career, your journey, and showing you these opportunities and opening up these doors. Can you think of people who are also influential in terms of those pauses or those pivots that have been able to help influence the direction you've taken as part of your own career?
Oh, yeah. There's so many. I mean, wow. It's hard to even list. I mean, one of the most critical people comes out of my civic action experience, a man named David Pico. And David was a partner at the Boston Consulting Group. He was the founding chair of Toronto City Summit Alliance, which became Action. And I had the opportunity to work really closely with him at the time. And I think what he did for me, in terms of your question, was he taught me how to take ownership of the work I was doing. So when I was at back in 2008, we were building a program called Diverse City. And one of the initiatives that I was tasked or asked to sort of take the lead on was a program called Diversity Fellows. And this program has now been, gosh, it's been running since 2009, and there have been hundreds of people that have gone through it. And and I remember, when I was building it, there were varying opinions from the people that we were testing the concept with. And I had a
Yeah.
pretty strong vision for what I thought it could be. And I remember we had one meeting in particular that was quite tenuous. And David called me, left a voice message for me afterwards, and he said, "Trust
Oh,
yourself.
wow.
You know what you want to do with this, and you know why you have this vision for the program. Trust your vision." And then the first session that we did was with thinker named Richard Florida. And David said to me, "When you go into that session and you introduce the session, you introduce yourself as the co-creator of the Diversity Fellows program." And
Yes.
I would not have done that naturally. I would have said, "I'm with the organization, I'm a staff person, I do this, I do this." And he said, "No, you go in there and you introduce yourself like this." And he kind of gave me this boost, which said, it's okay for you to claim ownership. And I think that that's a tough thing in for anybody, but I think it's even tougher for women. I think it's tougher for women of color, for Black women. And so for him to say that to me, it
Yes.
just gave me that extra push that I've continued to take. That's one of many. I can't list all the people, but there's so many people that have been.
That's a great example. I can so relate to that. I'm thinking about my time at the bank. So similar to you, have had, a very similar trajectory in terms of time on the not-for-profit side, time working for an organizing committee. So Vancouver, the Olympics in 2010, and then, time working at the bank. So working as part of the community investment philanthropic and donations team at Scotiabank. My my boss at the time, Jackie Ryan, she we were there on the executive floor. It was a donations philanthropic meeting. I go in, and it was, I think, it's an advisory council conversation we were having. Anyhow, I put together this deck, and I put together the deck thinking that, I know the material, but I thought because she's the senior person in the room that she would be leading the conversation, et cetera, et cetera. So I sit down. First of all, I wasn't even going to sit down around the board table. I was going to sit down on the outside of the board table. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me sit down, get everything set up. So I'm sitting there. She walks in and she goes, "Why are you sitting there?" And of course, I'm thinking, "Oh my God, am I not supposed to be in the room?" I'm stuttering through my answer, thinking, "I'm just going to set things up, then I'll sit in the back, or I'll leave." And I think she was a bit surprised at my reaction. She goes, "No, no, you need to sit at the head of the table. This is your meeting. You've created the content, the deck. I'm just here to support. I'm actually not even sitting around the table. I'm sitting in the back here. If there's anything, You let me know. And
Uh,
she said this before everyone came in. Like it's almost like she saw me before I saw myself. So I tell her this. Of course, she has no recollection of this conversation. It's so funny because it had such a dramatic impact because we're on the executive board of a major financial institution on Bay Street. I'm here with all these other significant executives who are all reporting into the CEO or senior in their own, in their own way. And the fact that she's like, no, this is yours. And anytime I remember talking through something or a challenging question, I would look at her and she'd just smile and nod and smile. Anything I could be saying, she'd just smile and nod, right? And she may add in, one or two things. And in addition to what he's saying, it was never but, it was always the and, right? And so I'm hearing you talk about David, and it's just amazing how these people have been placed in our lives who've kind of influenced in a positive way to see ourselves as, through our own career trajectory. So magical story. I love that. So now you talked a little bit about your own kind of career and your own journey, and now you've got your own shop. When did you learn, or what did you learn about yourself in kind of the space between when you left TD and now you can maybe talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing now through Pressic and starting Pressic. Like, what have you learned about yourself in that kind of space and that kind of transition? Because someone who's gone through something similar, I'd love to hear a bit more about that thought process and what you left. Because you left a very high profile, stable position in a very reputable organization. All these things that there was the same thing, and I can relate. So I'm just curious to know your own thought process and what you even learned about yourself as you went through that same kind of process as well.
it's a bit of a story, so
Yes.
I'm gonna take you back. I joined the bank in community investment, similar to you, and my intention was I'm gonna go because it was my dream job. I wanted to go and do community investment at TD. TD had already built an amazing reputation, and I wanted to be part of it, and I had the opportunity to help rebuild their whole strategy around this. And I thought, "I'll do this for 3 years, and then I'll go back, and I'll probably go back to the not-for-profit sector." But I was really fortunate to have a manager at the time, Andrea Barrick, who said, "I want you to, like, look around the bank and see if there's anything else you wanna do," you know? And so I had some conversations, and, one of those conversations led me to a person that I had met when I was working at Civic Action. He was now a senior executive at the bank, and I said, "You do strategy here in the on the retail side of the bank. Can you see anything here for me?" And he's like, "Well, like, I'm looking at your background, I'm not sure." And I just said, "Well, I'm just gonna plant that seed for you." And a year later, he comes back and he says, "There's a role in strategy that I'd love for you to consider." And I always say that when you're taking on these stretch roles, it's ideal if there's 50% of the job that you can do, at least, and then another 50% that is gonna be new and growth area for you. So I did that. I moved over and I was running a team that was doing a lot of different things: reward and recognition, internal communications, ESG, growth strategy, forecasting, planning, a whole gambit of things. And the first few months were hard, lots of self-doubt, but I had a manager who was really supportive, and even when I faltered, he was like, "Nope, you're gonna go do it again. Like, it's okay, get back
What
out
was
there."
hard? Was it drinking through the fire hose thing? Everything
Um,
was new, or what was it?
there are a lot of things that made it hard. I had gone through At that point, I had gone through cancer. I had a cancer diagnosis, and I had gone through treatment. That experience coincided with I had my cancer surgery 2 days before Ontario went into lockdown for COVID. This is the beginning of 2020. And then I began radiation treatment a day after George Floyd was murdered. And so that year, 2020, and I was co-leading the Black Employee Network at the bank. And I was in community investment. So, and I think for most Black people in organizations in 2020, you were taking on a very significant load, emotional, cognitive, strategic, in addition to your job. And so I was doing all of that in addition to being in a pretty serious treatment journey. Coming out of all that, I think it was probably 6 months after I finished treatment, I get promoted to VP in an area that I'm new in. So so I think, there's something to be said for a promotion and a stretch assignment. And then all of the challenges of 2020 there's a residual from that. Like, it doesn't just the year ended, but everything that we were carrying didn't really end. So there was all of that, and I think there was yeah, I think that made it challenging, and it was an area that it was frankly just an area that I hadn't worked in before, so I had to build a lot of new relationships, I had to learn how does work get done
Right.
here. Of course, it's the same
Oh,
organization, but different areas of an organization can have their own subcultures, and so even just getting accustomed to that subculture was a challenge, right? So it's all of those things made it challenging, but I was really proud of the work I did there. Ultimately, very proud of the work I did there. In course of that period, however, I also became the guardian of a 10-year-old child. So, suddenly my life was very different. I was performing a mom role to a 10-year-old suddenly in my life, and, that shifted my priorities in a really big way. Um, and she arrived in August, and I got another promotion in March of the following year. And so that second promotion was again a stretch area into the HR VP function. And there were many challenges with that role in the sense that again, a new culture, new division. I'm now a mom, and I'm having to learn all this stuff, and we're shifting into a period of austerity in the bank. So the economic drivers impacting the role were really taking a toll as well. Um, And in course of all of that, I ended up having an appointment with a new doctor, a cancer checkup appointment. And that doctor then says to me, "Tell me what's going on over the last 3 years." So so I tell her everything that I just told you, and she says, that's a lot. How are you doing?" And to be perfectly honest, I was not doing well. I was exhausted. I was completely exhausted. And so much of it wasn't about not being able to do the job. It was a cognitive load. It was having weeks where, you're spending, 95% of your days in meetings, running home, doing the parent stuff, and then getting back online and being online for another 3 or 4 hours. Because in the daytime, even if you had 5 minutes to do some desk work, the switching from, "Okay, I'm in a meeting, I'm listening, I'm taking paying attention," to then, "Okay, I'm gonna try and do some big thinking, strategic work. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back and do this. I'm gonna now have a one-on-one." Like, that kind of cognitive, like, flexibility becomes quite taxing and burdensome. And so, you pair that with all of these life quakes that were happening, and she said, "You need a break. You need a pause." And she actually prescribed me time off because she was seeing in me anxiety developing and depression, even though I didn't know that's what was happening. But her reviewing my symptoms, that is what she concluded. And so I took a break from work. And in that time period, I really like once my nervous system was restored, which again, you don't even realize that's happening to you. And then you have time and then you're restoring your nervous system and you're like, "What?" And so it was really, you know, that period of time where I could actually sit and really think about what do I want from my life? And I had been running so hard at full throttle since I was 13. And this was really the first time that I could think about this. And my mind took me to of course part of me really wanted to go back to the bank. I loved my work, I loved the people, but I also was really thinking a lot about what was working about work and what wasn't working. And like I said to you, whenever I'm in any space, I'm always studying the space. And so I had been really thinking about there's a lot that's not working with work. And burnout is rampant. 77% of employees are saying they experience some form of burnout. That's wild. And when you think about the impact on people, you think about the impact on organizations, I came to the conclusion that work isn't working for people and it's not working for companies either. Because companies are paying twice. When people experience burnout, companies pay twice for that. You pay for the time they're gone, and then if they don't come back, you're paying to retrain, you're like, there's a lot going on here, and their performance is stalling as well. And so that's what led me to develop Pressic. I really wanted to think about what kind of intervention could I contribute to this challenge around work not working for companies or people. The area that I mean, I think there's lots of things that can be done, but the area that I'm really keen on is how we develop talent and how we develop talent in the way that allows for development to be embedded in work as opposed to development being separate from work. So typically, development is something that, in some organizations, you'll have a conversation with your manager at the beginning of the fiscal year. They'll say, here are your performance objectives. Let's talk about how you want to grow this year. And you'll say, okay, I want to work on my communicating with impact. And they'll say, okay, great. So you write it down. Maybe you put down some activities. I'm going to take a course. I'm going to do this. And then you probably won't look at that again
Exactly.
until
Yeah.
performance review time. And so in all the work that I've done with teams that I've led, I've said, okay, so you want to work on communicating with impact. Let's look at what work are we going to do this year that allows you to practice that. And in my coaching, which I've been coaching for the last 8 years, I've always been really keen on the
Mm,
opportunity to practice things. That is something that we do not get a chance to do at work. At work, you get there, they say, go do this thing. But there isn't really, okay, so can I get some time to just try this out? And so what I've done with Pressic is we've built out a way for companies to embed development in work by identifying what work needs to be done and how then do we map development goals onto the work that has to be done and provide some support to individuals as they practice that in the role. So, you actually get an opportunity to try things out. You've got people around you who are supporting you in that process. You're growing. The company's getting a better product because they've got someone who's really invested in doing well because
right.
there's a self-interest in there. They've got another person on the team who's observing and supporting and mentoring and coaching so that balls don't get dropped. You've got two eyes on a single piece of work. And you've got a team that feels more gelled because they're helping each other to grow. And so that's the big thing that I've been working on right now, and I get so much joy from it because what I didn't anticipate, but what's happening is we're actually building practice-based cultures within these organizations. And having an organization where the natural thing is to practice means that you get better innovation because people, they feel safe enough to try things. They know that if they fail, there's someone to support them and help them up. You get better bonding with teams because they're growing and supporting each other, and you get better outcomes. So, in effect, work is beginning to work better when we see practice-based cultures.
I love that's the work that you're now doing at Pressic, and that focus is an area that I don't see a lot of organizations or institutions actually focusing and doubling down on. That time off that you had, yeah, that pause. So is this idea of creating your own company, your own shop, was this something that it was always in the back of your mind? Has it been something that's been kind of permeating in the back of your mind over the course of your career and the time that you had to kind of pause and reflect? It brought it to the forefront, or is it something that from putting your kind of put into your own, kind of give you that perspective and wanted you to explore it as well?
I had been coaching on the side ever since my CIBC days. So at CIBC, I did a lot of coaching there. I didn't have my own coaching. I didn't have my personal practice at CIBC, but that was where I really started to spread my wings in that area. And then when I came to T, I did more of it on the side. And many clients would say, "Hey, could you do some work with my team as well?" And I could never do that as a full-time executive. Like to really pull out and do team work with teams would be very challenging. But it was something that I kept note of. I kept noting there's a desire for this. And after I had, like, when I had my time off, my intention was to go back and work at the bank. Once it became clear that that wasn't going to happen, that I wasn't going to go back, I began to think, could this be the time that I really double down on this and take a chance and do the thing that seems to be in demand, at least based on what some of my clients are saying. And like you said, I had a good job. I had good profile in the organization. I had respect of my peers, good stable income, especially as I was performing this guardian role. But I really had to think about this desire to try this thing was not going away. And as I thought about how could I be a good parent to this child who's in my care, as much as it was important for me to have a good income, it was also important for me to be present for her. And in the state that I was prior to my leave, I didn't think that I could sustain that state and be present for her.
Yeah, there's so much I can relate to from that perspective as well. Going through a similar experience in terms of my own journey, right? And the fact that we did this amazing trip, we come back, the position that I had is no longer available. To figure out what am I going to do next. And I don't think, yeah, similar to what I was saying to you before, I don't think I could have ever envisioned that this is where I would be at this point in my life or career. Writing a book about our experience, speaking on stage about the themes of our experience in terms of what we learn, this concept of power of pausing and confidence of asking for what you want, being able to develop this kind of healthy arrogance, all of that. It's been such a such a formidable experience. I think the thing I've really also enjoyed as I'm hearing you speak is not only the time that I have. I mean, it's almost very tactical. My two girls, 9 and 12 now. I'll be honest with you, I don't think I could even tell you the names of their friends, right? I would know them in passing, or even their parents for that matter, but definitely not their friends. I would know them, and it always became this running joke that I did not know much about, what was going on outside of what was happening in front of my face, right? And I felt so disappointed and so disillusioned in terms of because I was mirroring many of the behaviors that I had seen practice in front of me as well, right? And the fact that now, I'm here when they leave. Generally here when they come back, but I'm much more engaged in their lives, which I enjoy because I know it's only going to be for a short period of time before they pursue things that are important to them, whether it be post-secondary institutions, work, et cetera, right? So that window is very important for me to be able to make sure that I get a chance to get to know them even intimately. And so the big thing for me is not only the time with them, but also for them to see that there are many pathways to quote unquote success or to pursue what it is. So I don't want them to see they're very familiar, and it's hard because when their friends ask them, what is it that your dad does now, right? Because we don't see him rushing off in the morning and coming back exhausted and cranky at the end of the day and then trying to catch up on everything that I missed during the week over the course of the weekend now. And not to say that they're saying this, but I maybe I'm fearing what they're saying from that perspective. But I just find that it's been very interesting to see them, my own journey, see how they've adjusted to the fact that I'm now much more engaged, more around, attending their activities, call their friends by their names, know what's going on, have conversations that are a bit more intimate than what I've been accustomed to in the past. So I also think about the benefit, not only in terms of the engagement and the time I've had with them, but also more about the fact that they can see that life and success is not linear, right? And so you don't need to do the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 to be considered to be worthy or successful. And so for me, I'm also happy about the fact that they can see a diverse array of what success looks like. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm sure your daughter probably same thing, right? The fact that as well able to see that too, and I think that there's a lot that's there. Well,
She's definitely proud, and, she's sometimes
oh, do
a
you?
marketer for me.
Yes,
Like, she's like, she's been growing in her ability to
beautiful.
describe what I do, and so I got a call from, one of the mentors that she has, and the person said, "Hey, your daughter was telling me that you do team development work."
Did she give him a business card too, or
Okay,
what's that is
good for
wow.
you.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
What was the hardest thing about letting go? When you stepped away from TD, thinking about the status, the influence, the title, all that stuff, all the carrots that come with it. What was the hardest part of letting go of that persona?
Identity. So much of my identity was wrapped up in that role or in that affiliation. And I remember even the first conference I went to last year as the founder and principal of Presic, I realized how much I benefited from the shorthand of being able to say, "I'm a VP at TD." There's an
R- Yes.
instant understanding of what that means. And I now was, like, having to explain and then lean on, "Oh, well, I was formerly an executive." Like, you're trying to help people understand that, I've done some things, you know? And having to let go of that, like, having to let go of that, and if people uncover that as they get to know me, that's okay, but just letting go of, "Okay, this is what I do now, and this is what I'm excited about. Tell me about yourself." Just that shift. Sabine Hershey wrote a really wonderful, vulnerable piece about this, where she talked about, as the CHRO of RBC, whenever she went to an event, she'd be at table number 1. You'd get to the event, someone's ushering you to the front. And then when you're not, they're like, "Oh, yes. Oh, I think you're at table 68." And
Wake up.
that is real. That is real, 'cause I remember back in the day, people would love to go to events with me
Yes.
because just all the good treatment. And now it's like, "I don't see you on the list." Yeah, so you have to get adjusted to that. And there's something
Yeah.
kind of comical about it, but it also is real. And it's funny because even while I was at the bank, especially, and I think you might relate to this,
Yes.
especially in those community investment roles, I remember
Yes.
always saying to myself and to my team, "We are nothing but trustees.
Yes.
We are trustees of this money, and our job is to ensure it gets invested responsibly."
I can completely relate to that because I had to remind myself and my ego the reason why you receive your ego gets this adoration from others is because of the position that you are holding. Ideally, you hope that there's a few people you're able to form a connection with that will transcend the job and the position and the quote unquote power that came as a result of that position too. But and the people you keep in touch with, you keep in touch with. But I tell you, I had to always remind myself the reason why, Charles, that this person has decided to. I was at a particular I was meeting with one of our donors. We arrived there, and I didn't realize that they had asked one of the members of my team for my quote unquote coffee order. I don't drink coffee, so they got me some other smoothie, something thing. I get there and she gives it to me. I'm like, oh, what is this? She explains, oh, this is your drink. Your colleague said this is your drink of choice. I was like, what is going on here? They, actually, we've pulled the president of so and so to come out to greet you and to integrate. Yeah, it's such a high and it's so fulfilling, but I had to remind myself like all this A can be taken away from me, and B, I can also decide to self-select and remove myself from this as well. But it's intoxicating to want to continue to feel that way and it's hard to separate yourself from that experience and from the position. And hearing you describe it, it's something I still grapple with now as well, in terms of very succinctly being able to describe to people what it is I do now, what difference am I making, what am I, and why did I make the choice, all those things. And sometimes I feel that I'm overly explaining myself. And as you said earlier, I've done some things, so I need to justify that this is what I'm doing now, type of thing. So I fully relate to that. Fully relate.
And so one of the things that I talk about with a lot of my clients, and I'm practicing this a lot myself too, is restraint. Because there is such a desire to just, you have to understand, like, I am somebody. You pay attention to me. Don't just look at my name card and walk away. But it's okay if they do that. I'm going to give you what I can give you. If it's not appealing to you, that's okay. I can try to be as interesting as I can, and I'm going to try to be
Yeah.
as
Dang. Yeah.
interested as I can as well.
Right.
And hopefully we
Right.
meet somewhere in the middle, you know? But it is a practice because going from
Yeah.
quick shorthand understanding of who you are and why they should pay attention to you, to now having to, you know, make the case essentially. It's a big shift.
Now that you are building something of your own, how do you how do you stop yourself from from recreating the same pace that you left.
It's so interesting because even in my research, that is one of the challenges when people take a burnout leave, they go back to work and they default into the same habits. So, unless you are very intentional about breaking that pattern, you'll take as many of these leaves as you want and nothing will change. I'm very fortunate to have very good friends around me who are very deliberate about planning fun. And because we live in a very scheduled society,
Wonderful.
scheduling the fun and that actually being the first thing that we schedule. I'm not there yet. I'm trying my best to get to the point where I can do that with more
Okay.
regularity and
Okay.
consistency. But ensuring that I am making space for that is really important. Um, and also creativity has always been like I started my career in the arts. Creativity has always been really important to me. And so ensuring that I am finding ways to be creative, like I think her name is Julia Cameron, who wrote the Artist Way, talks about going on an artistic date once a week, even just taking yourself on it, whether it's going to a museum, a gallery, or going to the dollar store and picking up things and just making art, like doing something artistic. Like that's been a big part of my practice as well, to ensure that I am not just because it's very easy, especially because I love what I'm doing. It's very easy to just be like my desk, but making the time to have fun, making the time to be creative, making the time to be in nature, and community is a really important part of that, like and again, this is an area that I'm still working on, but really finding ways to be in community with other people, I think is an important way to ensure that I maintain better balance.
I agree with you. I was just saying this to my spouse last week that, I feel so grateful to do what I do, and I get such there's this energy, this fire in my belly now with this idea of being able to speak on stage, to be able to share and disseminate my thoughts in a way that's compelling, hopefully to those who are listening to it as well, and to not only just be there to tell my story, but to ensure that I'm telling it in a way that it matters to them, right? That they're able to walk away with the what, so what, now what kind of thinking, right? But to your point, that balance is so important because I can realize that we're now at almost mid-April. I think to myself, well, who are the people that I have not engaged with? And I'm trying to be much more intentional about at least being able to meet with people in person, to have a brief conversation, coffee chat. But life happens, things get busy, but at least I want to be intentional about finding that time. And if it doesn't happen a particular week, then hopefully I can then be much more intentional about finding other opportunities or avenues to be able to connect with people. But that has been so important because the life of an entrepreneur or even solopreneur can be very lonely. And if you don't have that community to support you but not even just from an emotional and social and well-being support, of course, is very important, but also from being a sober second opinion on some of the things that you're working on and focusing on as well, right? So I think that piece is very, very important for people who are listening, who kind of feel fine on paper, but there's this kind of unsettling that's going on beneath this, underneath, essentially underlying tone. What's one question that you think they should sit with a little longer? What's something that you think that they
Mm.
should kind of just reflect on a little bit longer as they go through their own journey?
Here's one. If someone was to look at your habits, what would they say you are becoming? And your habits can be your calendar, it can be, what you do in the morning, how do you go to bed at night? Like, if someone was to look at your habits, what would they say you are becoming as a result? Because our habits inform what we are. So I think it's an important question. Like, what are you practicing?
What brings you joy? What are you practicing? What are your habits? I love that.
What are your habits turning you into?
I love that. As you kind of reflect on, thank you for sharing that. As you reflect on your own journey, what are you saying no to that you wish you had said yes to as you kind of made this transition in terms of your work with Pressic? Is there anything that you're saying no to that you kind of like, oh, I wish I kind of poked it a little bit more, or maybe I wish I had said yes to, as you reflect on that the transition you've taken from TD now to running your own shop with Pressic?
So you're asking what am I saying no to that in the past I would have said yes to? I'm not sure.
Even now, like, what have you said no to that you wish you had said yes to, as part of your own transition from TD to Pressic? Is there anything that you wish you had said no to? Is there anything that were you trying? For me, it's about trying to be all things to all people. As I think about the different opportunities to speak and engage with different audiences, I tend to kind of say yes to everything. Whereas being much more intentional about saying, this is the niche I want to work towards. Being all things to all people has exhausted me. It dilutes the brand, it dilutes my attention, it dilutes the work, etc. It's tiring. I'm just curious if there's anything, if you've had a similar journey, or if there's anything else outside of that that you wish, that you said no to that you wish you said yes to.
I think there have been many times in my life where I have pushed through instead of saying yes to taking more time. I would say when there's an opportunity to take more time, I wish I had done that. In many moments of my career, I have felt that if I took time away from work, that would be viewed as weak, or it would be viewed as you can't handle it. Other people are put because we reward so much of that. That's a lot of what gets celebrated. Oh, you know what? This person's grandmother was dying and their kid had a broken leg and they
Yes.
still came through. They pushed through it. Old and all these things were going on and he
Yes.
pushed through and we celebrate that and we say that's amazing. And so when you have a chance to take some more time, you're like, well, he came back from his heart surgery after 3 days. Like, why should I do that? And so I wish I had done that because I think in addition to the benefits that it would have for me, I think it's also an important example for other people. And yeah, I think we can do more to celebrate people who choose to take care of themselves.
This has been such an enjoyable conversation. It's been a long time since you and I have had a chat to hear about our own respective journeys and how things have evolved. And I love the work that you're doing now with Pressic, and how much of that is such a reflection of your own professional experience, and being so much more intentional about being able to focus on that development piece. Because you're right, there's so many times that we can think about where you take on a new opportunity, and of course you're expected to hit the ground running, and there's not much leeway or kind of latitude in terms of that runway to be able to help you kind of explore things, make mistakes, and try things along the way. So I love that that's the work that you and your team at Pressic are doing. But so many things I can relate to as part of your own journey, that every time you mention them, I'm like, yes, I can feel the introduction of meeting people to, even for me, sometimes the moments of self doubt as well in terms of this journey. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing so much, and I love to see the work that you're doing as well. It's been such an absolute privilege having you on the show today, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Much appreciated.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
and congratulations again.